I had some fun yesterday. I caught an Eddie Alvarez interview. He did a few. Eddie Alvarez was like out in New York City or something and did some kind of a media tour because his name kept popping up. And Eddie's in the same spot that Tyron's in. And we're going to talk to Tyron in a minute here. But he's in the same spot in that he's the brand new champion, but he's got his own vision of what he wants to do. And he doesn't just want to go fight somebody or just simply look at the ranking. He wants to make some money. He wants to do a fight that's a draw that can get you guys interested. He wants an interesting fight in addition to having a competitive contest and following the architecture that a champion has to do. So they asked him, my assumption, if you're Eddie Alvarez, you're at that 155-pound weight class, my assumption is that you want Conor. Conor himself will tell you it's red panty night. If you draw my name out of the hat, your pay is getting tripled. Well, that's true. Conor isn't just saying that. That's not just entertainment. Conor is selling out arenas, and he's a big draw, and his window's only going to last so long, but he's in his window right now, and if you can get opposite of the docket, it could change your whole life, much like when Floyd Mayweather in boxing fights somebody. Most of the time, we don't even know who the hell Floyd is fighting. We learn about it when Floyd signs the contract to fight him, and they do the big build-up and put the posters out and sell out the arenas. So I would imagine that Eddie wants to fight Conor. And they asked him about Conor, and Eddie dismissed him. Eddie, I wrote this down. These are some funny quotes right here. Eddie Alvarez said, "How can I take a guy seriously when he gets his suit at Build-A-Bear?" Do you guys know what Build-A-Bear is? Do you see why that's brilliant by Eddie? Do you see why that's funny? Conor McGregor is showing up in $10,000 custom-made suits, and he never wears the same one twice, okay? He takes a lot of time in his appearance and his fashion. It's half his shtick. Eddie Alvarez is essentially calling him a munchkin. He's essentially saying the guy is so small and says such a strange body that he's got to go into Build-A-Bear. That's brilliant. That's brilliantly funny. Eddie then comes out, and they try to get a breakdown from Eddie on who's going to win between Nate Diaz and Conor McGregor. And most fighters are going to go, "Oh, he's a bum, he's terrible, oh, I'll kick his ass." I mean, it's the same old shtick. You hear it all the time when they're trying to build something against somebody, and it never works. First off, it doesn't work because everybody else is doing it, so you're just blending in. And secondly, if I'm a consumer, why am I going to buy a fight that you just told me how it's going to end? If you kick the guy's ass, why do I want to pay to see that? I got to have some intrigue there for my $50. I got to not be quite sure what's going to happen. So here's what Eddie said. Eddie Alvarez was on fire. Eddie Alvarez said that Conor McGregor lost the first fight because he tripped over his own shoelaces. He said he's going to trip over his own shoelaces again. In fact, I'm not even going to call him Conor McGregor. I'm just going to call him Shoelaces from now on. And for the rest of the interview, he did. Every time they brought up Conor, or every time that Eddie had to say Conor's name, he just called him Shoelace instead. Do you realize why that's so funny? I mean, let's start with the fact that they're not wearing shoes. Let's start with the fact that it's an impossibility. So it's funny right out of the gate. He's calling him Shoelace and saying that Nate Diaz didn't knock Conor down, that Conor fell. And in fact, he fell over his own shoelaces. And now he just calls him Shoelace. That's brilliant and funny. And now all of a sudden I'm interested, okay? All of a sudden I'm interested. He accused him of getting his suits made at Build-A-Bear, and now he won't even call him his name. He just calls him Shoelace. Well, it looks like Eddie's all of a sudden in the driver's seat. I mean, all of a sudden it happens just like that. So then the reporter asks him about Nate. He goes, "Well, you know, Nate could win, and Nate fights at your weight class all the time. He'd be looking for a title shot too, and, you know, his stock would certainly go up." And again, instead of Eddie coming out and going, "Well, I'll kick Nate's ass, I'll fight any of them," instead of him doing any of that, he dismisses Nate and says, "You know, I think Nate's a sweet guy. I've got no problem with Nate. Nate used to carry my bags for me. I'd always give him an autograph or give him a tip. You know, he's a sweet guy." He called Nate Diaz a sweet guy. Do you guys understand why that's brilliant? Do you understand how condescending that is and how much that's going to piss off Nate Diaz? Look, you cannot create anything with a monologue. Okay, if you go after somebody and you're going to build something in the media, and it's the smartest thing you can do, is if you don't control the media, you don't control a damn thing. Ask anybody that's ever ran for the presidency. All the presidents have one thing in common. They had the media. Good or bad, they had it. So if you're going to go to the media, you got to have a monologue. Whatever you say, it's got to create a reaction. I apologize. You can't have a monologue. You've got to have a dialogue. Whatever you say, it's got to create a reaction. Whoever you're saying about it has to be something that they have to respond to. Once they respond, boom, you load up the chamber, you start firing again, and then you wait. They fire back, you go back and forth, boom, everybody's on board, you sign contracts, and you move forward. That's how it works. It's as simple as that. It's a very simple recipe. When Eddie Alvarez calls Nate Diaz a sweet guy, says that he used to pack his bags, and Eddie would pay him by giving him an autograph or a tip. Okay. Eddie's a genius. Eddie was brilliant. The whole thing was brilliant. It was a side of him I've never seen. It's a side of him that's got me interested. And I'm looking at it and going, well, this is extra compelling because Eddie Alvarez is the champion of the world. Which means in a worst case scenario, Eddie Alvarez's next fight's a co-main event. If he gets put on a stacked card, he ends up behind somebody. He's a co-main event. He's no lower than that. And most likely, Eddie's headlining his next show. Eddie doesn't need to talk about anybody. Eddie's the guy that gets talked about. That's what happens when you're the champion. Instead, he takes both of his most likely future competitors. Says one of them tripped over his shoelaces and then won't even call him by his name. And says the other one's a sweet guy that he used to give a tip to for packing his bags. It was just great. It was just great. Eddie Alvarez was great. And the son of a bitch can fight. There's no two ways about that. There's nobody running over Eddie Alvarez. There might be some guys that can beat him. That's a hard weight class. That's a really hard weight class. And that belt's changed hands a lot of times. But if you're going to beat Eddie, it's going to be tit for tat. You better hope that you have the judges on your side. Because you're not storming him. You're just not. That's just not in the cards. I've got hooked on audible.com. Go to audible.com/Chael. They will give you 30 free days and your first download